Hey everybody, Nick here. Today, 3 ways to unsuck your vibrato. Okay, number 1, think like a singer. What do I mean by that? A singer, I should say a good singer, will usually, not always, not an absolute here, but usually will hit the note they're going for first and then add vibrato a split second later. So in other words, we want to try and emulate this vocal style vibrato by first playing a note, let's say 7th fret G string, and then pausing briefly and then adding vibrato. So here's what that would sound like. Let me slide into it. Okay, see, I'm not doing this. Notice the difference. It's a little bit more of a dramatic pause. Okay, and we can do this with any note. If I play 7th fret on the D string. Okay, let's put this in the context of kind of like a blues lick. See that? I didn't go right to the vibrato. I didn't do that. Now sometimes you might want that if you're trying to be a little bit more aggressive. But a lot of times you're just trying to sing with your instrument. And just by giving it that little split second pause, you're creating a more natural vibrato, I think, because it emulates the human voice a bit more. So that's something to think about. Number 2, muting. Make sure you mute the adjacent strings or you're going to have a big mess. So if we have this same note, 7th fret G string, but we're not muting the strings around it, we get noise. Sometimes you might want a little noise. Most of the time you don't. So you've got to mute the strings around the note you're playing. So the easiest way to think about this is think about the note you're playing and then realize that every other string has got to be muted in some fashion. And so if we're playing on the G string, the top 2 strings need to be muted. The bottom 3 strings need to be muted if you're on a 6-string guitar. Okay, so the way I do this is the strings underneath the fretted note on the 3rd string in this case, the 2nd string and the 1st string, the B and E strings. They need to be muted, and they're being muted by the underside flesh of the fret hand. You can just barely hear a little bit of pick scratch there, but you're not hearing any notes ringing. Now, you can also mute with the free fingers on your picking hand. So check this out. You can touch the strings just lightly, which will totally mute those strings. And you got to be careful that you don't accidentally choke out the note you're playing, like that. But if you do this enough, it'll become second nature. You won't even think about it. Now we still have to address the 3 strings underneath the note we're playing. So the low strings, the D, the A, and the low E string. Now I'm muting these with my thumb on my pick hand. So I'm just barely touching those strings with my thumb. So check out my hand position on my pick hand. It's basically up against the strings in a way that mutes everything I'm playing. Okay, that'll give you a super clear note. If you're not used to the thumb muting thing, in other words, if you're not used to having your hand position like this, you can try other methods of muting the lower strings. I typically have a fulcrum bass. And so these fingers are coming away from the fretboard. So for me, this works the best. And you can work on the first point, which is to think like a singer, and this muting simultaneously, because you're going to hit the note first, and then you're going to add the vibrato. So when you hit the note, you can kind of make sure that everything's being muted. If I was to move this, the target note to, let's say, the B string. Let's go up to the 10th fret on the B string. Now the strings that need to be muted change, so now I just need to mute that high E string underneath, or above, I guess you could think of this, and then the 4 strings below it, which would be the G, the D, the A, and the low E. And so once again, I'm doing that with my thumb. If it was the A string, now I'm muting the low E with my thumb. I'm muting the 4th string and the 3rd string and a little bit on the 2nd with the underside of my index finger on my fret hand. And I'm also grabbing these strings, just slightly touching them with the free fingers on my picking hand. It's a beautiful system. It works every time. I remember learning kind of this whole muting thing by watching Total Electric Guitar by Eric Johnson, the instructional video, back in the, I think it was early 90s. And he kind of went through his process of muting, and that stuck with me. And it becomes second nature as long as you do it every time you play. Pretty soon you won't think about it anymore. And your notes will be really clear. So we want good vibrato that's vocal-like, and we want those notes to be clear. So that's 2 things right there. Number 3, and this one is just basic vibrato technique, is that when you vibrato a note, it's basically a bend. You're bending away from the note. How wide you bend, that's up to you. But the key point, the point I want to make here, number 3, is you always need to come back to the original note. If you don't, the note's going to stay sharp and it's going to sound out of tune. And I hear this quite a bit. And so we want to avoid that. So here's what I mean. Here's our note. Let's go back to that 7th fret on the G string. We're going to give this just a slight vibrato. So check out what's happening. Slow motion. Hear the bend? And then that note comes all the way back to the original pitch. If it didn't, it would sound more like this. Hear that? Starts to get a little bit sour. If you were hearing this in the context of a chord or music, you'd hear it a little bit more obviously. We need to come back to the original note. So think about that when you're vibrato. You can change the speed of that vibrato, but you still need to come, and the width of it, but you still need to come back to the original note. Number 1, think like a singer. Number 2, mute the adjacent strings. And number 3, always come back to the original pitch. That's it. That's all I got for you. Except if you want to also unsuck your sweep picking, check in the description below. I've got my free sweep picking boot camp, and I promise you that by using that, you will definitely unsuck your sweep picking. All right, here's to unsucking everything. Rock on.